The rain was coming down in sheets that Tuesday morning when my son Marcus drove away from Union Station, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with nothing but a torn duffel bag and $17 in my pocket. I watched his black BMW disappear into traffic, the same car I'd helped him buy 3 years ago when he started his marketing firm. He didn't look back. Not once. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd just abandoned could have bought that entire train station without blinking an eye. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Judith Adams, though most people call me Judy. I'm 73 years old, and until that morning at Union Station, I thought I knew exactly who I was in my son's life. I was the mother who'd raised him alone after his father walked out when Marcus was 8. I was the woman who worked double shifts at the diner to pay for his college. I was the grandmother who babysat his twin daughters every weekend, while he and his wife Brenda went to wine tastings and art galleries. I was also, apparently, the burden he could no longer carry. The morning started like any other Tuesday. I was in my small apartment in Riverside, California, packing the last of my belongings into cardboard boxes. Marcus had convinced me to sell the house where I'd lived for 42 years. The one where he'd taken his first steps and learned to ride a bike in the driveway. He said it was too much for me to maintain, that the neighborhood was going downhill, that I'd be happier in the senior living community he'd found for me in Phoenix. Years Manor, he called it. The brochure showed smiling elderly people playing bingo and doing water aerobics. What it didn't show was that it was 800 miles away from my granddaughters, from the church where I'd sung in the choir for 15 years, from the life I'd built piece by piece after losing everything once before. But Marcus was persuasive. He had charts and spreadsheets showing me how much money I'd save, how much better the healthcare would be, how I wouldn't have to worry about yard work or home repairs. Brenda nodded along, adding comments about how I'd make new friends and have activities planned for me. They made it sound like a vacation that would last forever. I should have known something was wrong when Marcus insisted on driving me to the train station himself, instead of letting me take the bus like I'd suggested. He said it would be easier, that he could make sure I got on the right train with all my luggage. I thought it was sweet, one of those rare moments when my son showed the care I remembered from his childhood. The ride to Union Station was quiet. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, his jaw set in that way it got when he was stressed about work. I tried to make conversation, asking about the girls, about how business was going, about whether they'd thought about visiting me in Phoenix for Christmas. His answers were short, distracted. When we pulled up to the station, Marcus got out and grabbed my 2 suitcases from the trunk. I reached for my purse, but he was already walking toward the entrance, moving fast like he was late for something. I hurried to catch up, my arthritis making each step a small negotiation with pain. Inside the station, Marcus led me to the ticket counter. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes and a patient smile, looked up as we approached. That's when everything changed. 2 tickets to Phoenix, please, Marcus said, pulling out his wallet. Actually, sir, I need to see identification for both passengers, the clerk said. Marcus paused, his hand halfway to his credit card. Both passengers? Yes, sir. Anyone 18 or older traveling needs their own valid ID for the ticket. I watched my son's face change, saw something shift behind his eyes. He looked at me, then back at the clerk, then at his watch. How much is 1 ticket? One way to Phoenix? That'll be $237. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I could see him calculating something in his head, his lips moving slightly the way they did when he was working through a problem. Finally, he turned to me and said, "Mom, I need to talk to you for a minute." We walked over to a row of plastic chairs near the departure boards. Marcus sat down heavily, his hands clasped between his knees. When he looked up at me, his expression was different somehow. Distant. "Look, Mom, I've been thinking about this move, and I wonder if maybe we rushed into it a little bit." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Phoenix is expensive. The deposit for Years Manor is $5,000, and that's just to get you in the door. Then there's the monthly fee, the healthcare costs, getting your prescription transferred." He ran his hand through his hair. "Brenda and I, We've been looking at our finances, and with the girls starting private school next year, money's gonna be tight. I stared at him. Marcus, you told me you'd already paid the deposit. I know, but I can get it back if we cancel in the next 24 hours. He leaned forward, his voice taking on that persuasive tone I'd heard him use with clients. What if you stayed in California? Found a nice little apartment somewhere affordable? You could get a job, something part-time, keep yourself busy. A job? Marcus, I'm 73 years old. Lots of people work past retirement age these days. Look at Walmart, they love hiring seniors. And there are other places. You're still sharp, Mom. You could make it work. I looked around the train station, at the people hurrying past with their rolling suitcases and their purpose, at the departure board showing trains leaving for dozens of cities I'd never seen. But my house is already sold. The closing was yesterday. I know, but that gives you some money to work with. Not a lot, but enough to get started somewhere. How much money, Marcus? He shifted in his seat. Well, after the real estate fees and the outstanding mortgage, about $18,000. $18,000. For a house I'd bought for $32,000 in 1981 and had been paying on for decades. A house that was now worth at least $400,000 according to the real estate websites I'd been secretly checking. Where's the rest of it? Marcus looked uncomfortable. There were a lot of fees, Mom. The real estate agent, the title company, some repairs that needed to be done before closing. And there was that loan I took out against the house a few years ago for the business. Remember? I told you about that. I didn't remember agreeing to any loan, but Marcus had handled all the paperwork, said it was too complicated for me to worry about. I'd trusted him because he was my son, because he had a college degree and a successful business, and a big house in the suburbs. So what are you saying, Marcus? I'm saying maybe this whole Phoenix thing was a mistake. Maybe you'd be better off staying in California, starting fresh somewhere new. You're tough, Mom. You raised me on your own. You can do this. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. This wasn't the teenager who'd cried in my arms when his girlfriend broke up with him. This wasn't even the young man who'd hugged me at his college graduation and whispered that he couldn't have done it without me. This was someone who'd just stolen my house and was now abandoning me at a train station because taking care of his mother had become inconvenient. You're not coming with me, I said. It wasn't a question. Mom, I want to help you, but I can't just drop everything and move to Phoenix. I have responsibilities here. The business, the girls, Brenda's family. What about your responsibility to me? Marcus stood up, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. You're a grown woman, Mom. You can take care of yourself. You always have. He pulled out his wallet and counted out bills. Here's $200. That should cover a bus ticket.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Somewhere and a few nights in a motel while you figure things out. $200. For a lifetime of sacrifice. For working double shifts to pay for his college. For babysitting his children every weekend. For trusting him with my house and my future. I took the money because I didn't know what else to do. Marcus picked up my suitcases and started walking toward the exit. Your train to Phoenix leaves in an hour if you change your mind. He called over his shoulder. The ticket's $237. I watched him walk away, his shoulders straight, his stride confident. At the door, he turned back and waved, the same casual wave he'd give to an acquaintance. Then he was gone, and I was alone in Union Station with 2 suitcases, a torn duffel bag, and $217 to my name. At least, that's what he thought. I stood there for a long time, watching people come and go, businessmen in expensive suits rushing toward their trains, young couples holding hands and checking their phones, families with children and too much luggage, the parents looking frazzled, and the kids looking excited. All of them had somewhere to go, someone waiting for them. I found a bench near the big windows and sat down. The rain was still coming down outside, and the sky was so gray it looked like evening, even though it was barely noon. I opened my purse and counted my money again. $217. In Los Angeles, that might buy me 3 nights in a cheap motel if I was lucky. But I wasn't worried about money. Not really. What I was worried about was the crushing realization that my son, the person I'd loved more than anyone else in the world, had just thrown me away like yesterday's newspaper. I was worried about what it meant that I'd been so blind to who he really was. I was worried about the granddaughters who would grow up thinking their grandmother had just disappeared one day. Mostly, I was worried about the person I'd become. The woman who'd been so grateful for scraps of attention from her son that she'd signed away her house without reading the paperwork. The woman who'd been so desperate to stay connected to her family that she'd agreed to move 800 miles away from everything she knew. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. I had 12 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. As I watched, it rang again. Hello? Mrs. Adams? This is Patricia Vance from Meridian Trust and Estate Services. I've been trying to reach you for the past week. I knew that name. Meridian Trust. They'd been handling my late sister Helen's estate for the past 18 months, ever since she died in that car accident in Portland. Helen, who'd never married, who'd worked her whole life as a pharmaceutical sales representative, who'd traveled the world and sent me postcards from places I'd never heard of. I'm sorry, Ms. Vance. I've been dealing with some family matters. I understand completely. Mrs. Adams, I need to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible. There are some documents that require your signature and some decisions that need to be made regarding your sister's estate. I thought everything was already settled. You said there were some debts to pay off and maybe a small inheritance. Well, that's what we thought initially. But we've discovered some additional assets that weren't included in the original inventory. Some investments, some property holdings. Mrs. Adams, I think it would be best if we discussed this in person. I looked around the train station, at the departure board showing trains leaving for San Francisco, Seattle, Denver, Chicago. Ms. Vance, I'm currently in Los Angeles. Would it be possible to meet somewhere here? Actually, that's perfect. I'm in our Century City office this week. Would tomorrow morning work for you? Yes, I said, though I had no idea where I'd be staying tomorrow morning. That would be fine. Excellent. Mrs. Adams, I don't want to get your hopes up, but I think you're going to be very pleased with what we've discovered. After I hung up, I sat there for another hour, watching the rain streak down the windows. People continued to come and go, all of them seeming to know exactly where they belonged in the world. I thought about calling Marcus, about telling him I'd changed my mind, about begging him to come back and get me. But I didn't, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I was starting to remember who I used to be before I became Marcus's mother. I was starting to remember the woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college. The woman who'd stood up to her ex-husband when he tried to take Marcus away from her. The woman who'd rebuilt her life from nothing once before. I was starting to remember Judith Adams, and she didn't beg. Instead, I picked up my bags and walked to the information desk. The young man behind the counter looked up with a smile. Can I help you? Yes, I said. I need directions to the nearest decent hotel. Something clean and safe, but not too expensive. There's a Holiday Inn about 6 blocks from here. It's not fancy, but it's reliable. Perfect. And could you tell me how to get to Century City from there? Sure thing. Metro Red Line to Wilshire, then transfer to the Purple Line. About 45 minutes total. I thanked him and started walking toward the exit. As I pushed through the heavy glass doors, I felt the rain on my face and realized it had stopped seeming like a punishment. It felt like a baptism. The Holiday Inn was exactly what I needed. The room was small but clean, with a view of the parking lot and a coffee maker that actually worked. I took a hot shower, ordered room service, and spent the evening watching old movies on cable. For the first time in months, I didn't worry about whether I was being too much trouble for anyone. The next morning, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I'd worn to Marcus's wedding, and took the train to Century City. The Meridian Trust offices were on the 32nd floor of a glass tower that seemed to reach up into the clouds. Patricia Vance was a woman about my age, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Adams, thank you so much for coming in. Please have a seat. Can I get you some coffee? That would be lovely, thank you. She poured coffee from a silver service and handed me a delicate china cup. Mrs. Adams, I'm going to be direct with you, because I think you deserve the truth. When your sister Helen died, we initially thought her estate was relatively modest. A small savings account, some personal effects, her condominium in Portland. That's what you told me. Yes. But Helen was apparently a very private person when it came to her finances. Over the past 18 months, we've discovered that she had investments and holdings that weren't immediately apparent. Some of them were in trust accounts, some were in offshore holdings, some were in companies that took us time to track down. Patricia opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. Helen was much wealthier than anyone realized. She'd been investing wisely for over 40 years, and she was the primary beneficiary of several family trusts dating back to your grandparents. I set down my coffee cup carefully. How much money are we talking about? Mrs. Adams, your sister's estate is valued at approximately $12.7 million. After taxes and fees, you'll inherit just over $9 million. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the arms of my chair and stared at Patricia. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? $9 million, Mrs. Adams. Give or take a few $100,000, depending on some final valuations. $9 million. I thought about Marcus counting out $200 at the train station, telling me I was a grown woman who could take care of herself. I thought about him taking out a loan against my house, about the $18,000 he'd given me from the sale of my home. When would this money be available? We can arrange for an initial transfer within the next few days, say $1 million to start, while we finalize the rest of the paperwork. The full amount should be available within 30 days. I signed the papers with a hand that was surprisingly steady. Patricia explained about tax implications and investment options, about setting up new accounts and working with financial advisors. I listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. I was no longer the confused old woman who'd been abandoned at a train station. I was a woman with options. Walking back to the hotel that afternoon, I felt different. Not just because of the money, though that was certainly part of it. I felt different because I was no longer waiting for someone else to decide my future. I was no longer hoping that my son would remember he loved me. I was no longer willing to make myself smaller to fit into other people's lives. That evening, I ordered room service again and spread all my papers out on the small desk. I had Patricia's business card, bank account information, and a folder full of documents I was finally ready to read carefully. I also had my phone, and 17 missed calls from Marcus. I didn't call him back. Instead, I ordered a bottle of wine from room service and sat by the window, watching the lights of Los Angeles spread out below me like a blanket of stars. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably wondering where I was. Whether I'd made it to Phoenix. Whether I was settled into Years Manor playing bingo and making new friends. He had no idea that the woman he'd abandoned was now worth more than his house, his car, and his business combined. He had no idea that the mother he'd discarded like an old appliance was about to become the kind of person who could change his life with a single phone call. But I wasn't ready for phone calls yet. I was still figuring out who I was now that I didn't have to be grateful for whatever scraps of love people threw my way. I was still learning how to be Judith Adams again, the woman who'd been buried under years of trying to be the perfect mother, the helpful grandmother, the uncomplaining burden. The wine was good, better than anything I'd had in years. I raised my glass to the window, to the city lights, to the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. Here's to new beginnings, I said aloud and took a sip. The next morning, I called Patricia and asked her to recommend a good attorney. Then I called a real estate agent and asked about rental properties in the area. I wasn't ready to buy anything yet, but I wanted to see what was available for a woman who no longer had to count every penny. By noon, I had appointments scheduled for the next 3 days. By evening, I had a temporary apartment in a high-rise building in Santa Monica, complete with a view of the ocean and a doorman who called me Mrs. Adams with genuine respect. I still hadn't called Marcus back. His voicemails were getting increasingly frantic. The first few were casual, asking how the trip went and whether I liked Phoenix. The later ones were more urgent, wondering why I wasn't answering my phone. The most recent one, left at 2 a.m, was from Brenda. Judy? It's Brenda. Marcus is really worried about you. The people at Years Manor say you never checked in. Please call us back. We just want to know you're okay. I saved the message and went to bed in my new apartment, in a real bed with Egyptian cotton sheets and a view of the Pacific Ocean. I fell asleep to the sound of waves instead of traffic, and for the first time in months I slept through the night without waking up worried about being too much trouble for anyone. The attorney Patricia recommended was a sharp woman named Rebecca Chen, who specialized in estate law and family matters. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. Mrs. Adams, I need to ask you some difficult questions about the sale of your house. Do you have copies of the paperwork you signed? Some of it. Marcus handled most of the details. I'd like to review whatever you have. Based on what you've told me, there may have been some irregularities in the transaction. She was right. Over the next week, as Rebecca investigated the sale of my house, we discovered that Marcus had forged my signature on several documents. The loan he'd taken out against my house was for $400,000, not the modest amount he'd implied. The real estate agent had been instructed to sell quickly, well below market value, to ensure a fast closing. Mrs. Adams, your son committed fraud, multiple counts of fraud. This is a serious criminal matter. I stared at the stack of documents on Rebecca's desk. What are my options? You could press charges. You could sue for damages. You could demand full restitution. With the evidence we've gathered, you'd almost certainly win. And if I don't, then he gets away with stealing over $300,000 from you. I thought about Marcus at the train station, counting out $200 like it was a generous gift. I thought about him telling me I was a grown woman who could take care of herself. I thought about the granddaughters who would grow up without knowing their grandmother because their father had decided I was too much trouble. What would you recommend? Rebecca leaned back in her chair. Personally, I'd make him sweat for a while. Let him wonder where you are and what you're planning. Then, when you're ready, you make your move. My move? You remind him who he's dealing with. You remind him that you're not the helpless old woman he thinks you are. You remind him that actions have consequences. I left Rebecca's office with a plan forming in my mind. It wasn't about revenge, exactly. It was about justice. It was about making sure that Marcus understood what he'd done and what it cost him. But first, I had some living to do. Over the next month, I settled into my new life in Santa Monica. I joined a gym and started working with a personal trainer who didn't treat me like I was made of glass. I enrolled in a photography class at the local community college. I bought a car, a small BMW that was the same model as Marcus's, but in silver instead of black. I also started dating. Robert was a retired professor I met at a coffee shop near the pier. He was 75, recently widowed, and had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Our first date was a walk on the beach. Our second was dinner at a restaurant where the wine cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. You seem like a woman who's recently discovered her power, he said over dessert. Is it that obvious? It's attractive. There's nothing more beautiful than a woman who knows her worth. I thought about Marcus, about the $18,000 he'd given me from the sale of my house, about the way he'd walked away from me at the train station without looking back. I thought about the woman I'd been then, grateful for whatever scraps of love people threw my way. I'm still learning my worth, I told Robert. But I'm a quick study. The calls from Marcus had stopped after the first week. I assumed he'd decided I was settled in Phoenix and no longer his problem. But then, 6 weeks after he'd left me at the train station, he called again. Mom? Mom? Is that you? I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. Hello, Marcus? Jesus, Mom, where have you been? I've been calling and calling. The people at Years Manor say you never showed up. I've been going crazy wondering what happened to you. Have you? Of course I have. You're my mother. I was starting to think something terrible had happened to you. I sipped my wine and watched a sailboat glide across the water. Something terrible did happen to me, Marcus. My son abandoned me at a train station with $200 and told me I was a grown woman who could take care of herself. There was a long pause. Mom, I know you're upset about how things went down, but I explained all that. I had to think about my family, about what was best for everyone. Your family. You know what I mean. Brenda and the girls, they have to come first. I have responsibilities. What about your responsibility to me? Mom, you're 73 years old. You can't expect me to take care of you forever. I thought about the $9 million in my bank account, about the oceanfront apartment I was renting, about the car in the garage that was newer than his. You're right, Marcus. I can't expect that. So where are you? Are you okay? Do you need money? I'm fine, Marcus. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. But where is that? Are you in Phoenix? Are you staying at Years Manor? I'm in California. I decided to stay after all. California? Where in California? Are you staying in some fleabag motel? Mom, this is exactly what I was worried about. You can't just wander around with no plan. I have a plan, Marcus. I have a very good plan. What kind of plan? Mom, you're scaring me. You sound different. I am different. Being abandoned by your child tends to change a person. I didn't abandon you. I gave you options. I gave you money. You gave me $200, Marcus. After stealing $300,000 from the sale of my house. The silence on the other end of the phone was so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight and defensive. I didn't steal anything. I handled the sale of your house, and yes, there were expenses. The loan I took out was for business purposes, to help support the family. I never hid that from you. You forged my signature on the loan documents. I did not forge anything. You signed those papers. Show me. What? Show me my signature on the loan documents. Bring them to me and show me where I signed. Another long pause. Mom, I don't know what you're trying to prove here, but I'm not going to be accused of fraud by my own mother. Then don't commit fraud against your own mother. I think you're confused. Maybe you should see a doctor. Sometimes older people get confused about things they've signed. I set down my wine glass and walked to the edge of the balcony. Below me, the beach was dotted with evening joggers and couples walking hand in hand. Normal people living normal lives. People who didn't have to worry about their children stealing their homes and abandoning them at train stations. Marcus, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not confused. I am not a helpless old woman who doesn't understand what she's signed. I am a woman who trusted her son and was betrayed by him. I am a woman who gave you everything and was thrown away like garbage when I became inconvenient. Mom, that's not. I'm not finished. I am also a woman who has options you don't know about. I am a woman who can take care of herself better than you ever imagined. And I am a woman who is done being grateful for scraps of love, from people who should love her unconditionally. What are you talking about? What options? You'll find out, Marcus, when I'm ready for you to find out. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. Then I called Rebecca Chen. Rebecca, it's Judith Adams. I'm ready to make my move. Rebecca worked fast. Within 3 days, she'd filed preliminary paperwork with the district attorney's office and initiated a civil lawsuit against Marcus for fraud, elder abuse, and theft. She'd also frozen the accounts where the money from my house sale had been deposited, pending investigation. The beauty of this approach, Rebecca explained during our meeting, is that we're not just going after him for the money. Elder abuse carries serious criminal penalties in California. If convicted, he could face up to 4 years in prison. I stared at the legal documents spread across her mahogany desk. Seeing Marcus's name listed as a defendant felt surreal, like reading about a stranger. How long before he finds out? He'll be served with papers tomorrow morning. I've arranged for process servers to visit both his home and his office. He won't be able to avoid this. That evening, I had dinner with Robert at a seafood restaurant overlooking the marina. The setting sun cast everything in golden light, and I found myself actually relaxing for the first time in weeks. We talked about his travels, my photography class, the book he was writing about medieval history. You seem lighter tonight, he observed over coffee. More at peace. I'm taking action instead of just reacting. It feels good to have some control over my life again. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, then another. Then it started ringing. Excuse me, I told Robert, stepping away from the table to answer. Mom, what the hell is going on? Marcus's voice was shrill with panic. I just got served with papers saying I'm being sued for fraud. They're talking about criminal charges. What did you do? I walked out onto the restaurant's deck, where the sound of waves would muffle our conversation. I hired an attorney to review the sale of my house. You hired an attorney? Mom, this is insane. We're family. You don't sue family over misunderstandings. It's not a misunderstanding, Marcus. You forged my signature and stole $300,000 from me. I did not forge your signature. And I didn't steal anything. That money went to pay off debts and expenses related to the house. Then you should have no problem proving that in court. Mom, listen to me. You need to call off your lawyer. This is going to destroy my business, my reputation. Do you understand what you're doing to me? I watched a young couple walking hand in hand along the beach below. Their laughter carried on the evening breeze. I understand exactly what I'm doing. If this goes to court, if there are criminal charges, I could lose everything. The business, the house, the girls. Brenda's already talking about taking them to her mother's in Florida until this blows over. You should have thought about that before you abandoned your mother at a train station. I didn't abandon you. I gave you choices. I gave you money to start over. $200, Marcus. You gave me $200 after stealing $300,000. I didn't steal anything. His voice was getting louder, more desperate. Mom, please. Call off the lawsuit. We can work this out as a family. We stopped being family the moment you drove away from Union Station. That's not fair. I was trying to do what was best for everyone. No, you were doing what was best for Marcus. What was easiest for Marcus. What allowed Marcus to keep living his comfortable life without having to worry about his inconvenient mother. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Colder. Fine. If you want to play hardball, we'll play hardball. But you should know that Brenda and I have been talking to an attorney too, about having you declared mentally incompetent. I felt my breath catch. Excuse me? Think about it, Mom. You sold your house and moved across the country, then disappeared for weeks without telling anyone where you were. You're making irrational decisions, hiring lawyers to sue your own family. A judge might very well decide you're not capable of managing your own affairs. The threat hung in the air between us like poison. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. If you try to have me declared incompetent, Marcus, you will discover just how competent I really am. Is that a threat? It's a promise. I hung up and stood there for a moment, watching the waves crash against the shore. The young couple had disappeared, but their laughter still echoed in my memory. I thought about what it would be like to lose control of my life again. To have some judge decide that Marcus knew better than I did about my own future. Then I thought about the $9 million in my bank account, and I smiled. When I returned to the table, Robert was waiting with a concerned expression. Everything all right? It's about to be. The next morning, I called Rebecca and told her about Marcus's threat. She listened without interrupting, then let out a low whistle. He's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Can he actually have me declared incompetent? He can try. But it's not easy, especially when the person in question is clearly functioning well. You'd need a psychological evaluation, but I know several excellent forensic psychologists who would assess you fairly. Set it up. I want to get ahead of this. Judith, there's something else. I've been digging deeper into your son's business finances, and there are some irregularities there too. It looks like he's been using client money to cover personal expenses. If the state investigators find what I think they'll find, he's going to have much bigger problems than our lawsuit. That afternoon, I drove to Beverly Hills and bought myself a new wardrobe. Not the practical, modest clothing I'd worn for years, but beautiful things. A silk dress the color of champagne. A cashmere coat that felt like a cloud. Shoes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget used to be. The saleswoman at Nordstrom treated me like royalty once she realized I wasn't just browsing. She brought me champagne while I tried on clothes, offered to have everything tailored to fit perfectly, suggested accessories I never would have considered. You have exquisite taste, she said as I examined myself in a full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me was elegant, confident, powerful. She looked like someone whose opinion mattered, whose time was valuable, whose presence commanded respect. I'm just learning to dress for the life I actually live, instead of the life other people think I should have. That evening I had dinner at my apartment with Helen's old friend Margaret, who'd driven down from Portland to meet me. Margaret was a striking woman in her 70s, with silver hair and bright blue eyes, wearing jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. Helen talked about you all the time, Margaret said over wine. She worried that you were too generous for your own good, too willing to sacrifice yourself for other people. She was right. She left you all that money because she knew you'd eventually need to be independent. She saw how your son treated you at family gatherings. The way he'd interrupt you, dismiss your opinions, treat you like a servant rather than his mother. I set down my wine glass. Helen saw that? Helen saw everything. She was furious about it, but she knew you wouldn't listen if she said anything directly. She hoped that someday you'd have the resources to choose a different life. I'm choosing now. Good. Helen would be proud. Margaret stayed for several hours, telling me stories about Helen's travels, her investments, her fierce independence. Helen had never married because she'd never found a man who could match her intelligence and ambition. She'd built her fortune through smart investing and careful planning, and she'd lived exactly the life she wanted. She used to say that the best revenge against people who underestimate you is to prove them spectacularly wrong. The psychological evaluation Rebecca had arranged took place 3 days later in a clinical office in Century City. Dr. Sarah Martinez was a forensic psychologist who specialized in competency evaluations for the elderly. She was professional but warm, putting me at ease immediately. The evaluation lasted 4 hours and included cognitive tests, memory assessments, and detailed interviews about my life and recent decisions. Dr. Martinez asked about the house sale, my relationship with Marcus, my current living situation, and my future plans. Mrs. Adams, I need to ask you directly about your son's concerns. He's claimed that you've been making irrational decisions, that you've been confused and unpredictable. How would you respond to that? I would say that my son is a man who stole $300,000 from his mother and is now trying to discredit her because she's fighting back. And the lawsuit you filed against him is based on documented evidence of fraud that has been reviewed by a competent attorney. I didn't file suit because I was confused or emotional. I filed suit because my son committed crimes against me. What about your decision to stay in California instead of moving to Phoenix as originally planned? Was based on the realization that I have resources and options I didn't know about before. Moving to Phoenix would have isolated me from support systems and legal remedies. Staying in California allowed me to address the fraud and build a new life for myself. Dr. Martinez made notes throughout our conversation. At the end of the session, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Mrs. Adams, I want to be clear about something. Based on my evaluation, you are absolutely competent to manage your own affairs. Your cognitive function is excellent. Your decision-making process is sound, and your responses to recent challenges have been both rational and appropriate. If your son pursues this competency claim, I will testify that it has no merit whatsoever. That weekend, I decided to visit Marcus's neighborhood. Not to confront him, but to see how he was living with the knowledge that his world was falling apart. I drove through the gated community in Glendale where he'd moved after his business started doing well, past the manicured lawns and identical Mediterranean-style houses. His house looked the same from the outside, but there were subtle signs of stress. The lawn hadn't been mowed recently. There were newspapers piling up on the driveway. One of the garage doors was slightly open, revealing boxes stacked inside. I parked across the street and watched for a while. Brenda came out to get the mail, looking haggard and wearing sweatpants in the middle of the day. She'd always been so careful about her appearance, so concerned with maintaining the perfect suburban wife image. Now she looked like a woman who'd stopped sleeping well. Marcus's BMW wasn't in the driveway. According to Rebecca's investigation, his business bank accounts had been frozen pending the fraud investigation. He was probably scrambling to keep his company running while dealing with angry clients and suspicious creditors. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt something closer to justice. My phone rang as I was driving home. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Grandmother Judy? The voice was small, uncertain. Emma? Sweetheart, is that you? Yes. I'm calling from Mom's phone. She doesn't know. Emma was one of Marcus's twin daughters, 8 years old and precociously smart. I hadn't talked to her since before Marcus abandoned me at the train station. How are you, sweetheart? How's your sister? We're okay. But Mom and Dad have been fighting a lot. And Mom says we might have to move to Florida to live with Grandma Beth. How do you feel about that? Scared. I don't want to leave my friends. And I don't understand why you went away. Dad said you moved to Arizona, but then he said maybe you didn't. And now Mom cries a lot. My heart clenched. Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever happens between your parents and me, I want you to know that I love you and your sister very much. That will never change. Are you mad at Dad? I thought about how to answer that question honestly without putting an 8-year-old in the middle of an adult conflict. Your dad and I have some grown-up problems we need to work out. But none of that is your fault, and none of it changes how much I love you. Will we see you again? Yes, sweetheart. I promise you will see me again. Mom's coming. I have to go. The line went dead, leaving me alone in my car with tears streaming down my face. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. Those little girls didn't deserve to have their world torn apart because their father was a fraud and a thief. But then I remembered the woman I'd been before Marcus abandoned me. The woman who'd worked 3 jobs to support her family. The woman who'd fought for what was right even when it was difficult. The woman who'd taught Marcus that actions have consequences. That woman wouldn't have let him get away with stealing from her, just to keep the peace. That woman would have demanded justice. I drove home and called Rebecca. I want to offer Marcus a settlement. Judith, are you sure? We have a strong case. We could get everything back plus damages. I don't want everything. I want him to understand what he did, and I want him to face consequences, but I don't want my granddaughters to suffer more than they already have. What kind of settlement did you have in mind? Full restitution of the stolen money plus interest. A formal admission of guilt, public apology. And he transfers custody of the girls' college funds to me. That's generous. What if he refuses? Then we proceed with the criminal charges and take him for everything he's worth. Rebecca drafted the settlement offer that evening. It was delivered to Marcus's attorney the next morning, with a 48-hour deadline for response. He called me directly 6 hours later. Mom, I got your settlement offer. And? It's insane. You want me to admit to felony fraud in writing? Do you understand what that would do to me? I understand exactly what it would do to you. The question is whether you understand what refusing will do to you. You're trying to destroy my life. I'm trying to save what's left of it. The criminal investigation is moving forward whether you settle with me or not. At least this way, you might avoid prison time. I can't afford to pay back $300,000. My accounts are frozen. My business is falling apart. I don't have that kind of money. Then you should have thought about that before you stole it. Mom, please, can't we work something out, some kind of payment plan? I'll pay you back over time, I promise. Marcus, I don't need your money. I need you to understand what you did to me. I need you to acknowledge that you stole from your mother and abandoned her when she needed you most. Fine, I'll apologize. I'll say I made mistakes. But I can't admit to criminal fraud. It would ruin everything. Everything is already ruined, Marcus. You ruined it when you decided I was disposable. There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from me? I want you to be the man I raised you to be. I want you to take responsibility for what you've done. I want you to understand that your actions hurt people, and that those people matter. And if I do that, if I sign your settlement agreement, then you might have a chance to rebuild your life and your relationship with your daughters. If you don't, you'll lose everything anyway, but you'll lose it in a much more public and humiliating way. The settlement deadline came and went without a response. On the 3rd day, Rebecca called with news. The district attorney's office has decided to move forward with criminal charges. Marcus will be arrested tomorrow morning. I was having lunch with Robert when the call came. He reached across the table and took my hand. How do you feel? Like I've been holding my breath for 2 months and can finally exhale. That evening, I drove to Emma and Olivia's school. I waited in the parking lot until classes let out, then watched as they walked to the pickup area. They looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. Emma was carrying a backpack that looked too heavy for her shoulders. Olivia was clutching a stuffed animal I'd given her for her birthday. Brenda arrived to pick them up in her SUV, but before they got in the car, Emma looked around the parking lot like she was searching for something. Or someone. I wanted to get out of my car and run to them, to hug them and tell them everything would be okay. But I couldn't. Not yet. They needed their world to stabilize before I could be part of it again. Instead, I drove home and wrote them each a letter. I didn't mail the letters. I just needed to put my feelings into words. To promise them that their grandmother still existed, still loved them, still planned to be part of their lives when the time was right. Marcus was arrested the next morning at his office. According to the news report Rebecca forwarded to me, he was charged with 3 felony counts of fraud and 1 count of elder abuse. The story included a photo of him in handcuffs being led to a police car, his face twisted with humiliation and rage. I felt no satisfaction looking at that photo. I felt no joy in seeing my son's public humiliation. I felt only a deep sadness for the man he'd chosen to become and the family he'd destroyed with his greed. But I also felt something else. Relief. The woman who'd been abandoned at Union Station with $200 was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who refused to be invisible, someone who understood her own worth. Judith Adams was back, and she was just getting started. The call came at 7 in the morning, 3 days after Marcus's arrest. I was on my balcony drinking coffee and watching the surfers catch the early waves when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mrs. Adams? This is Detective Sarah Kowalski with the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. I'm calling about your son's case. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Has something happened? Mr. Adams has requested a meeting with you. He's claiming he has information that might be relevant to our investigation, but he'll only discuss it in your presence. What kind of information? I can't get into specifics over the phone, but it involves additional financial irregularities we weren't previously aware of. Would you be willing to come in for a meeting? An hour later, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the district attorney's office, facing my son across a metal table. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. His hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and crushing stress. Detective Kowalski sat between us with a thick file folder and a digital recorder. Mr. Adams, you requested this meeting. Why don't you tell us what you wanted to discuss? Marcus looked at me, then at the detective, then down at his hands. I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? Detective Kowalski asked. I'll plead guilty to the charges related to my mother's house if you agree not to investigate my business accounts. The detective raised an eyebrow. Why would we agree to that? Because if you dig into my business, you're going to find things that hurt a lot more people than just me. I leaned forward. What things, Marcus? He met my eyes for the first time since I'd entered the room. I've been using client money to cover operational expenses, moving funds between accounts to make it look like we had more liquidity than we actually did. If my clients find out, they'll sue me for everything, and they'll lose their investments too. How much money are we talking about? Detective Kowalski asked. About $2 million. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I stared at my son, this man I'd raised to understand right from wrong, who was now admitting to stealing from people who'd trusted him with their financial futures. So you want to protect your clients by pleading guilty to defrauding your mother? I asked. I want to minimize the damage. If I go to prison for the business fraud, my clients lose everything anyway. At least this way, they might have a chance to recover their money. Detective Kowalski made notes on her legal pad. Mr. Adams, this isn't how plea negotiations work. You can't just decide which crimes you want to be charged with. But you could recommend leniency if I cooperate fully with the investigation into my personal dealings. What are you really asking for, Marcus? I said. He looked at me with something that might have been desperation. I'm asking you to drop the civil lawsuit. Let me plead guilty to the criminal charges, do whatever jail time they give me, but don't take every penny I have left. If you bankrupt me completely, my clients never get their money back. I thought about the young couple I'd seen on the beach that first night, laughing and walking hand in hand. I thought about trust and betrayal, about consequences and responsibility. I thought about the granddaughters I hadn't seen in months. What about Emma and Olivia? What about them? Where are they now? How are they handling all this? Marcus's composure cracked slightly. They're with Brenda in Florida. They think I'm on a business trip. They don't know about the arrest, the charges, any of it. And when are you planning to tell them? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe it's better if they just think their dad is a businessman who travels a lot instead of a criminal. I stood up from the table and walked to the small window that looked out over downtown Los Angeles. The city stretched endlessly in all directions. Millions of people living their lives, most of them probably honest, most of them probably trying to do right by their families. Detective Kowalski, could I have a moment alone with my son? Of course. I'll be right outside. After she left, I turned back to face Marcus. Do you understand what you've done? I made some bad financial decisions. I took some risks that didn't pay off. No, Marcus. You stole money. From me, from your clients, from people who trusted you. That's not bad decision-making, that's theft. I was trying to save the business. I was trying to keep everything afloat until I could turn things around. By stealing from your mother and lying to your clients. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I sat back down across from him. But you did hurt people. You hurt me when you forged my signature and took money that wasn't yours. You hurt your clients when you gambled with their investments. You hurt your daughters when you created a situation that forced them to leave their home and their school. I know I screwed up. This isn't about screwing up, Marcus. This is about who you chose to become. This is about the man who looked at his 73-year-old mother and decided she was disposable. Tears started forming in his eyes. I didn't think of it that way. How did you think of it? I thought you'd be okay. You're tough. You always land on your feet. I thought maybe this would be good for you, give you a chance to start fresh somewhere new. With $200 and no support system. I was going to help you get settled once things calmed down. When? After you'd stolen every penny from my house sale? After you'd made it impossible for me to come back to California? When exactly were you planning to help me? He didn't answer because we both knew there was no good answer. There had never been a plan to help me. There had only been a plan to get rid of me as efficiently as possible. Marcus, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. If you could go back to that morning at Union Station, knowing what you know now, would you do things differently? Of course. How? I'd figure out a way to make the Phoenix thing work. I'd find the money for the deposit somehow. So you'd still send me away. You'd just do it more competently. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You're not sorry you hurt me, Marcus. You're sorry you got caught. He looked down at his hands again. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. I want you to admit that you saw me as a burden you needed to dispose of. I want you to acknowledge that you stole from me because you thought I was too old and too stupid to fight back. That's not true. Then why did you do it? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Marcus looked up and met my eyes. Because I was scared. Of what? Of having to take care of you. Of having to change my life to accommodate yours. Of having to explain to Brenda and the girls why Grandma was living with us, or why we were spending money on your care instead of their future. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years. So you decided to steal my future instead. I didn't think of it as stealing. I thought of it as managing your assets more efficiently. Efficiently for whom? For everyone. You'd have a place to live, activities, medical care. We'd have financial stability. It seemed like a win-win. Except I wasn't consulted about any of it. You wouldn't have understood the complexities. There it was, the truth he'd been dancing around. In Marcus's mind, I was too old and too simple to understand my own life. I was a problem to be solved, not a person to be respected. I understand more than you think I do, Marcus. What does that mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken of my new apartment. The ocean view, the elegant furniture, the life I'd built for myself after he'd thrown me away. This is where I live now. His eyes widened as he took in the obvious expense of the furnishings, The prime real estate visible through the windows. How can you afford this? The same way I can afford the attorney who's prosecuting you. The same way I can afford to reject any plea deal that doesn't include full restitution and a public acknowledgement of what you did. I don't understand. Your Aunt Helen left me some money, Marcus. Quite a bit of money. More than enough to live very comfortably for the rest of my life. How much money? Enough that I don't need your $200 or your Phoenix retirement home or your weekend babysitting jobs. Enough that I can choose exactly how I want to live and with whom I want to spend my time. The color drained from Marcus's face as the implications sank in. How long have you known? I found out the day after you abandoned me. While you were driving home in your BMW thinking you'd solved your mother problem, I was meeting with estate attorneys and learning that I'm worth more than your house, your business, and your fancy cars combined. So this whole lawsuit, the criminal charges, it's all just revenge? No, Marcus, it's justice. It's making sure you face consequences for what you did. It's ensuring that you understand that stealing from people is wrong, even when those people are old women you think won't fight back. But if you have money, if you're fine, then what's the point? I stood up again and moved toward the door. The point is that you don't get to steal from your mother and walk away without consequences. The point is that you don't get to treat people like disposable objects just because you think they're powerless. Mom, wait, please. Can't we work something out? I'll pay you back every penny, plus interest. I'll do community service. I'll go to counseling, whatever you want. What I want is for you to serve whatever sentence the court gives you. What I want is for you to understand that actions have consequences, even when you're someone's beloved son. What about Emma and Olivia? Don't you care what this does to them? I paused with my hand on the door handle. I care about them more than you know. But they need to learn that their father isn't above the law, and that people who steal money go to jail. It's a hard lesson, but it's an important one. They'll hate me. They might. But that's not my fault or my problem. That's yours. I opened the door and found Detective Kowalski waiting in the hallway. Are you ready to continue? Actually, I think we're done here. My son has made his position clear, and so have I. Mrs. Adams? Marcus called from behind me. What if I give you everything? The house, the cars, whatever's left in the business accounts. What if I sign over everything to you? I turned back to look at him one last time. Marcus, you still don't understand. I don't want your things. I don't need your money. I just want you to face the consequences of your choices. Then what was this all for? What's the point of destroying my life if it doesn't get you anything? The point is that women like me don't have to accept being treated like garbage just because their sons think they can get away with it. The point is that even 73-year-old mothers have dignity and rights, and the ability to fight back when they're wronged. I left him sitting at that metal table and walked out of the building into the warm California sunshine. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt truly free, not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd stood up for myself, because I'd refused to be invisible. That afternoon, I called Emma's school in Florida. The secretary was helpful when I explained that I was the children's grandmother and wanted to send them something. I'm sorry, but we can't give out student information to family members unless the parents have specifically authorized it. Of course. Could you tell me how I could get in touch with their mother to request that authorization? If your family, shouldn't you already have her contact information? I explained the situation as delicately as I could. That there had been a family disagreement, that the children had moved suddenly, that I'd lost touch and just wanted to send birthday gifts. I understand. Let me see what I can do. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Judy? It's Brenda. Her voice was exhausted, defeated. Gone was the confident suburban princess who'd once treated me like hired help. Hello, Brenda. How are the girls? They're confused. They miss their friends, their school, their life. This whole situation has been a nightmare for them. I'm sure it has. Judy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is there any way you could drop the charges against Marcus? Why would I do that? Because those little girls love their father. Because they don't understand why he's not here, why we had to leave everything behind, why their whole world has been turned upside down. I sat down on my couch and looked out at the ocean. Brenda, did you know what Marcus was doing with my house? There was a long pause. I knew he was handling the sale for you. Did you know he'd forged my signature on loan documents? Number. Of course not. Did you know he'd stolen $300,000 from me? It wasn't stealing. He was managing your finances. He was trying to help you. Help me by taking money that wasn't his and lying about it? You have to understand, Judy. We were under a lot of financial pressure. The business was struggling. The girls' school tuition was due. We had the mortgage and car payments. Marcus was trying to keep everything together. By stealing from his mother. He wasn't trying to hurt you. He thought you'd be happy in Phoenix, that you'd make friends and have activities. He thought it would be good for you. And the money he stole, was that good for me too? Brenda's voice became pleading. Judy, I'm begging you. Those children have already lost their home, their school, their friends. Don't make them lose their father too. I'm not making them lose anything, Brenda. Marcus's choices did that. But you could fix it. You could make this all go away. At what cost? At the cost of teaching those girls that stealing is acceptable if you're desperate enough? At the cost of showing them that women have to accept being mistreated by the men in their lives? That's not what this is about. That's exactly what this is about. Marcus looked at his mother and decided she was disposable. He stole from me because he thought I was too old and too weak to fight back. If I let him get away with that, what am I teaching Emma and Olivia about their own worth? There was silence on the other end of the line. When Brenda spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from us? I want you to tell the girls the truth. I want them to understand that their father made some bad choices and has to face the consequences. I want them to know that their grandmother loves them and is looking forward to being part of their lives again when the time is right. And when will that be? When Marcus has served his sentence and shown that he understands what he did wrong. When this family has had time to heal and figure out how to move forward. That could be years. Yes, it could be. Judy, please. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But Marcus is a good father. Whatever else he's done, he loves those girls. I'm sure he does. But love isn't enough if it's not accompanied by integrity. Those girls need to see that actions have consequences, even for people they love. So you're willing to let them suffer to make a point? I'm willing to let them learn an important lesson about justice and accountability, even though it's painful. Because the alternative is raising them to believe that people can steal and lie and abandon family members without facing any consequences. I don't think you understand what you're asking of us. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you to be honest with your children about who their father really is. I'm asking you to teach them that integrity matters more than comfort. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony and watched the sun set over the Pacific. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the waters sparkled like diamonds in the fading light. It was beautiful and peaceful, but I felt heavy with the weight of the choices I'd made. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt, really. I was just sad. Sad for the family we might have been if Marcus had made different choices. Sad for the granddaughters who were paying the price for their father's crimes. Sad for the son I'd raised who'd become someone I barely recognized. But I wasn't sorry. Justice isn't always comfortable or convenient. Sometimes it requires sacrificing short-term peace for long-term principle. Sometimes it means accepting that the people you love are capable of disappointing you in devastating ways. My phone buzzed with a text message from Robert. Dinner tomorrow? There's a new place in Malibu I'd love to try with you. I smiled and typed back, yes, I'd like that very much. The next morning brought news that Marcus had decided to plead guilty to all charges rather than risk a trial. According to Rebecca, he would likely serve 18 months in minimum security prison, followed by 3 years of probation and community service. He'll also have to pay full restitution, Rebecca explained during our phone call. The judge ordered him to liquidate his assets to cover what he owes you, plus interest and legal fees. What about his clients? That's a separate matter. The state is investigating, but it looks like he'll be charged with additional counts of fraud related to his business dealings. How much money will his clients lose? Hard to say. Maybe half their investments, maybe more. Depends on how much he can recover from the assets he liquidated. I thought about those unnamed people who'd trusted Marcus with their retirement funds, their children's college money, their dreams of financial security. They were victims, too, casualties of my son's greed and poor judgment. Rebecca, I want to do something. What kind of something? I want to set up a fund to help compensate Marcus's clients. Not full restitution, but something to help offset their losses. Judith, that's very generous, but you're not legally responsible for your son's business debts. I know, but those people trusted him, and they're going to suffer because of what he did. I can't fix everything, but I can help. How much are you thinking? $2 million. Enough to give each client back at least half of what they lost. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure about this? That's a significant amount of money. I'm sure. I want to do something positive with Helen's inheritance, something that helps people instead of just punishing them. I'll set it up. It will be a private fund, administered through the court system as part of the restitution process. That afternoon, I drove to a flower shop in Beverly Hills and bought the most beautiful arrangement I could find. Roses, lilies, and baby's breath in shades of pink and white that reminded me of spring mornings and new beginnings. I drove to the cemetery where Helen was buried and placed the flowers on her grave. The headstone was simple. Helen Marie Adams, 1948 to 2023. She lived on her own terms. Thank you, I said aloud, feeling foolish but needing to say the words anyway. Thank you for giving me the resources to fight back. Thank you for believing I was worth more than I believed myself. A gentle breeze stirred the flowers, and for a moment I could almost hear Helen's voice, sharp and practical as always. Don't thank me yet, Judy. Thank me when you've built the life you actually want instead of the life other people think you should have. I laughed despite my tears. I'm working on it, Helen. I'm working on it. That evening I called Margaret in Portland and told her about the victim compensation fund I was setting up. Helen would approve, Margaret said. She always believed that money should be used to solve problems, not create them. I keep thinking about those people who trusted Marcus. They didn't do anything wrong, but they're going to pay for his mistakes. You can't save everyone, Judy, but you can help where you can. And you can make sure the lesson gets learned. What lesson is that? That actions have consequences. That people who steal and lie and betray trust don't get to walk away without facing justice. That even little old ladies have teeth when they need them. I smiled at that. I never thought of myself as having teeth. You always had them. You just forgot how to use them. After we hung up, I made myself dinner and ate it on the balcony, watching the waves roll in and out in their eternal rhythm. The water was dark now, reflecting the lights from the pier and the distant city. It was peaceful and beautiful, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. Grandma Judy? The voice was tentative, young. Emma? Sweetheart, how did you get this number? I found it in Mom's phone when she was sleeping. I've been wanting to call you for so long. My heart ached with missing her. How are you, baby? How's school in Florida? It's okay. Different. The kids here talk funny, and they don't have some of the books I like. But Mom says we might move back to California soon. Really? Why is that? She says Dad's business trip is almost over, and things might be different when he comes home. I closed my eyes, hating that this little girl was being lied to about something so important. Emma, has anyone explained to you what's really happening with your dad? Mom says he's working on a big project and that's why he can't call us very much. But I heard her crying on the phone with Grandma Beth, and she said something about jail. What do you think about that? I think grown-ups lie to kids when they think the truth is too scary. But the lying is scarier than the truth usually is. out of the mouths of babes. You're a very smart little girl. Grandma Judy, is Dad in trouble? I took a deep breath and made a decision that would probably get me in trouble with Brenda, but felt like the right thing to do. Yes, sweetheart, your dad is in trouble. He made some bad choices with money, and now he has to face the consequences. Is that why you went away? Your dad and I had a disagreement about how he was handling some money that belonged to me. It made me very sad, and I had to get some help from lawyers to sort it out. Are you still sad? Not sad exactly, more disappointed. I love your father very much, but I don't like some of the choices he made. Will you come see us when he gets out of trouble? I would love to see you and your sister again. More than anything. Good. I miss you, and I miss your chocolate chip cookies. I miss you too, baby. More than you know. Grandma Judy? Yes? I know Mom and Dad think I don't understand grown-up stuff, but I do understand some things. I understand that Dad did something wrong and you're trying to make him learn from it. Is that what you think is happening? Yes. Like when Mom takes away my iPad when I don't do my homework. She's not being mean to me. She's teaching me that I have to be responsible. That's exactly right, Emma. So you're teaching Dad to be responsible too. I'm trying to. Good. I think he forgot for a while. We talked for another 10 minutes about school and friends and books she was reading. When it was time to hang up, Emma said something that made my chest tight with love and pride. Grandma Judy? I'm glad you're not the kind of grandma who lets people be mean to her. What kind of grandma am I? You're the kind who fights back. The kind who stands up for what's right even when it's hard. Is that a good kind of grandma to have? It's the best kind, because it means you'll teach me to be strong too. After she hung up, I sat in my beautiful apartment with tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of hope. Because Emma understood. Because she was going to grow up knowing that women don't have to accept being mistreated. Because she was going to learn that integrity matters more than comfort. Marcus might have forgotten the lessons I taught him about right and wrong, but his daughters were still young enough to learn them properly. And when the time was right, I was going to be there to help teach them. Marcus was sentenced on a Thursday morning in downtown Los Angeles. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching my son stand before the judge in an orange jumpsuit that made his skin look sallow and drawn. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals now shuffled when he walked, his ankles shackled, his hands cuffed behind his back. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes, read the charges aloud: fraud in the first degree, elder abuse, breach of fiduciary duty. Each word echoed in the nearly empty courtroom like a hammer blow. Mr. Adams, you have pleaded guilty to all charges. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say? Marcus stepped forward to the microphone, his voice barely audible when he spoke. Your Honor, I want to apologize to my mother and to all the people who trusted me. I made terrible decisions that hurt innocent people, and I take full responsibility for my actions. The words sounded rehearsed, coached by his attorney. There was no real emotion behind them, no genuine understanding of the devastation he'd caused. Even now, standing before a judge who would determine his fate, Marcus seemed to view this as a performance rather than a reckoning. Mr. Adams, the court has reviewed your case extensively. What you did to your mother represents one of the most callous forms of elder abuse this court has seen. You didn't just steal money from her. You stole her security, her trust, her sense of safety in the world. You left her abandoned and vulnerable, believing she had nowhere to turn. I watched Marcus's shoulders tense as the judge continued. The fact that Mrs. Adams had other resources unknown to you doesn't diminish the cruelty of your actions. You acted with the belief that you were destroying an elderly woman's life for your own financial benefit. The law exists to protect people exactly like your mother from people exactly like you. The judge sentenced him to 2 years in state prison followed by 5 years of probation. He would serve his time at a minimum security facility, but it was still prison, still real consequences for real crimes. As the bailiff led Marcus away, he turned to look at me one last time. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and I saw something there I hadn't seen before. Not anger or resentment, but a flicker of what might have been understanding. He nodded slightly and I nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. Recognition that this moment had been inevitable from the second he'd chosen to betray my trust. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca walked with me to my car. "How do you feel?" "Empty," I said honestly. Not satisfied, not vindicated, just empty. That's normal. Watching someone you love face consequences for hurting you is never easy, even when it's necessary. His daughters are going to grow up knowing their father is a convicted felon. His daughters are going to grow up knowing that actions have consequences, even for people in positions of power. That's not a bad lesson to learn. That evening, I had dinner with Robert at a quiet restaurant in Laguna Beach. We sat on the terrace overlooking the water, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. The sound was soothing, eternal, a reminder that some things endure no matter what chaos erupts in human lives. "You've been quiet tonight," Robert observed over dessert. "It's been a difficult day." "Tell me about it." I described the sentencing hearing, the way Marcus had looked in his orange jumpsuit, the judge's words about elder abuse and betrayal. Robert listened without interrupting, his hand covering mine across the small table. "Do you regret pursuing the charges?" "Number? But I don't feel good about it either. I feel like I've lost my son twice. Once when he abandoned me at that train station, and again today when I watched him be taken away in handcuffs." "You didn't take him away, Judith. His bus politis. Choices did that." "I know. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are different things. What will you do now?" "I'm not sure. For the first time in months, I don't have legal meetings, or court dates, or crises to manage. I can just live my life." "That sounds wonderful." "It sounds terrifying." Robert laughed, a warm sound that carried on the ocean breeze. "Why terrifying?" "Because I spent so many years defining myself in relation to other people. I was Marcus's mother, Emma and Olivia's grandmother, Frank's wife. Now I'm just Judith Adams, and I'm not sure what that means anymore. It means you get to decide who you want to be from now on." 3 weeks after the sentencing, I received an unexpected phone call from Brenda. Her voice sounded different when she spoke, less polished, more genuine than I remembered. "Judy, I want to talk to you about the girls." "What about them?" "They know the truth now. About Marcus, about what he did, about why we had to leave California. I couldn't keep lying to them." "How are they handling it?" "Emma is angry. She feels like everyone has been treating her like a baby, lying to her about important things. Olivia doesn't really understand, but she knows something bad happened and that's why Daddy can't come home. I'm sorry they're going through this. Judy, Emma has been asking about you constantly. She wants to know when she can see you again. Whether you still love her, whether you're angry at her because of what Marcus did." My throat tightened. "She thinks I'm angry at her?" "She's 8 years old. She doesn't understand the difference between being angry at someone and being angry at their behavior. In her mind, if you're mad at Daddy, you might be mad at her too. That's not how it works." "I know that and you know that, but she's a child. She needs to hear it from you." "What are you asking, Brenda?" "I'm asking if you would consider seeing them. Not permanently, not as part of some big custody arrangement. Just a visit. Just so they know their grandmother still loves them." I looked out at the ocean from my apartment balcony, watching a pod of dolphins play in the waves offshore. The sight never got old. The reminder that life continued in all its forms, regardless of human drama and pain. "Where are you now?" "Still in Florida with my mother, but we're planning to move back to California soon. The girls need stability, and their whole life is there. Their friends, their school, everything familiar." "What about money?" "How will you support yourselves?" "I'm going back to work. I have a nursing degree that I never used after we got married. There's a hospital in Riverside that's offered me a position." "That's good. The girls need to see their mother as strong and capable." "Judy, I need to ask you something else." Marcus's lawyer says you've set up some kind of fund to help his business clients recover their losses. I have. Why would you do that? You don't owe those people anything. Because they trusted Marcus, and he betrayed that trust. They're victims too, just like I was. I can't fix everything, but I can help where I can. That's incredibly generous. It's what Helen would have wanted me to do with her money. Something constructive instead of just punitive. There was a long pause before Brenda spoke again. Judy, I owe you an apology. For what? For the way I treated you when Marcus and I were married. For making you feel unwelcome in your own son's house. For acting like you were an inconvenience instead of family. You were protecting your territory, I understand that. No, it was more than that. I was jealous. Jealous of what? Of how much Marcus respected you. Of how he would light up when you walked into a room. Of the way he talked about you when you weren't around. Like you were the strongest person he'd ever known. I felt tears starting to form. He talked about me that way? All the time. He was so proud of how you'd raised him on your own. How you'd worked multiple jobs to put him through college. How you'd never asked for anything in return. I felt like I could never measure up to that legacy. So you tried to diminish it instead. Yes. And I was wrong. I was petty and insecure. And I helped create the distance between you and Marcus. I take responsibility for that. What changed your mind? Watching you handle this whole situation. Watching you refuse to be a victim, even when everyone expected you to just disappear quietly. The girls need to see that kind of strength. They need to know they come from women who don't give up when life gets hard. A week later, I drove to John Wayne Airport to pick up Emma and Olivia. Brenda had agreed to let them spend a long weekend with me, their first visit since Marcus had abandoned me at the train station 8 months earlier. I arrived early and waited at the gate, nervous in a way I hadn't been since my first date with Robert. What if they were different now? What if they'd changed too much? What if they blamed me for their father's imprisonment? But when they came walking down the jetway, Emma leading the way with her chin set in determination, and Olivia trailing behind clutching a stuffed elephant, they looked exactly like the granddaughters I remembered. Emma spotted me first and broke into a run, throwing herself into my arms with such force that I staggered backward. "Grandma Judy, I missed you so much." Olivia was more hesitant, hanging back until I crouched down to her level and opened my arms. "Hello, sweetheart. Do you remember me?" She nodded solemnly and stepped forward for a careful hug. "Are you still my grandma, even though Daddy's in trouble?" "I will always be your grandma, no matter what. Nothing can change that." "Even if Daddy did bad things?" "Even then. What your daddy did was wrong, but it doesn't change how much I love you and your sister." The drive back to Santa Monica was filled with chatter from Emma, who had 8 months' worth of experiences to share. She told me about her new school in Florida, about the alligators she'd seen in a swamp, about missing her friends in California. Olivia was quieter, but she held my hand from the back seat and asked periodic questions about where we were going and what we would do. My apartment was a revelation to them. They ran from room to room, marveling at the ocean view, the balcony, the fancy kitchen appliances. Emma stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, her face pressed against the glass. "Grandma Judy, this place is like a castle. How can you afford to live here? Remember your Aunt Helen, my sister who died a couple of years ago? She left me some money that allows me to live in nice places like this. Are you rich now? I'm comfortable now. I have enough money to take care of myself and to help other people when they need it. Is that why you helped Daddy's customers get their money back?" I looked at her in surprise. "How do you know about that?" "I heard Mom talking to Grandma Beth about it. She said you gave a lot of money to people Daddy had hurt, even though you didn't have to." "That's right. Why did you do that?" I sat down on the couch and pulled both girls close to me. Because sometimes bad things happen to good people, and when we have the ability to help, we should. Even when the bad things were caused by someone in our family? Especially then. We don't get to walk away from responsibility just because it's uncomfortable or expensive. Emma nodded seriously. "Mom says Daddy forgot about responsibility for a while. I think that's a good way to put it. Will he remember again when he gets out of jail?" "I hope so. That's what jail is supposed to do. Give people time to think about their mistakes and decide to make better choices. That night, I made dinner for the three of us in my kitchen. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread, but the girls acted like it was a feast. We ate on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, while seagulls swooped and called overhead. "This is the most beautiful place I've ever seen," Olivia said, her voice filled with wonder. "I'm glad you like it. Would you like to come visit again? Can we? Really?" "Whenever your mom says it's okay." Emma set down her fork and looked at me seriously. "Grandma Judy, are you lonely living here by yourself?" "Sometimes. But I have friends now, and I have activities that keep me busy. And I have you girls when you come to visit." "What kind of friends?" "Well, there's Robert, who's a very nice man I met at a coffee shop. And there's my neighbor Mrs. Chen, who teaches me to play mahjong. And there are people in my photography class." "You take photography?" "I do. Would you like to see some of my pictures?" I showed them my portfolio from the community college class. Photos of beaches and birds and street scenes around Los Angeles. The girls were impressed, especially Emma, who had always been artistic. "Could you teach me to take pictures like this?" "I would love to teach you. We could start this weekend if you want." That night, I tucked them into the guest bedroom I'd prepared, with matching twin beds and stuffed animals I'd bought specially for their visit. Olivia fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from travel and excitement. But Emma stayed awake, staring at the ceiling in the dim light from the hallway. "Grandma Judy?" "Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad you didn't let Daddy get away with being mean to you." "What do you mean?" "Mom told me that sometimes people think old ladies won't fight back when someone hurts them." "But you fought back. You showed everyone that you're not someone people can be mean to." "Is that important to you?" "Yes. Because someday, I'll be old too. And I want people to know I won't let them be mean to me either." I kissed her forehead and smoothed her hair back from her face. "You're going to be a very strong woman, Emma Adams." "I hope so. I want to be like you." The weekend flew by in a blur of beach walks, photography lessons, and long conversations. I taught Emma how to frame a shot and adjust camera settings. I showed Olivia how to identify different types of seashells. We built sandcastles and flew kites, and ate ice cream on the pier. On their last night, we had dinner at Robert's house in Manhattan Beach. He'd offered to cook for all of us, and I wanted the girls to meet this man who'd become such an important part of my new life. Robert was wonderful with them, patient with their questions, and genuinely interested in their thoughts and opinions. He showed them his library, which covered one entire wall of his living room, and let them choose books to borrow. "Your grandmother is a remarkable woman," he told them over dessert. "She's taught me that it's never too late to start over, to become the person you were always meant to be." "What was she meant to be?" Emma asked. "Strong, independent. Someone who refuses to settle for less than she deserves." After dinner, while Robert and I cleaned up the kitchen, the girls played in his backyard with his elderly golden retriever Marley. I watched them through the window, these beautiful children who carried my son's eyes and my own stubborn chin. "They're lovely," Robert said, following my gaze. "They're everything good about Marcus without any of the selfishness or entitlement. Children often are. They haven't learned yet that the world owes them anything. I worry about them, growing up without their father, dealing with the shame of having a convicted felon for a parent. They'll be fine. They have you now, and they have a mother who's learning to be strong. That's more than a lot of children have." When it was time to take them back to the airport, both girls cried. Emma hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, and Olivia refused to let go of my hand until the very last moment before boarding. "Will you come see us in California when we move back?" Emma asked. "As often as your mother will let me." "Will you bring your camera?" "I'll bring my camera." "Will you bring Robert too?" "I want to read more of his books." I laughed. "I think that can be arranged." Flying back to Florida, Emma texted me from Brenda's phone. "Thank you for the best weekend ever. I love you, Grandma Judy." 2 months later, Brenda and the girls moved back to California. They rented a small house in Riverside, close to the hospital where Brenda had started working night shifts in the pediatric ward. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and safe and theirs. I helped them move in, hiring professional movers and making sure they had everything they needed to start over. I bought Emma a real camera for her 9th birthday and enrolled her in a photography camp that summer. I signed Olivia up for swimming lessons at the local community center, but I was careful not to overwhelm them or try to replace Marcus in their lives. I visited once a week, took them for weekend adventures occasionally, and was available whenever Brenda needed help. I wanted to be a constant, positive presence without being intrusive or controlling. One evening in late summer, we were having dinner at my apartment when Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandma Judy, when Daddy gets out of jail, will you forgive him?" I set down my fork and considered my answer carefully. "Forgiveness is complicated, sweetheart. It doesn't mean pretending that someone didn't hurt you. It means choosing not to carry anger around with you anymore. So will you? I don't know yet. That will depend on whether your daddy has learned from his mistakes and is ready to be the kind of person who deserves forgiveness." What would he have to do? He would have to show me that he understands what he did wrong and why it was wrong. He would have to prove that he's changed, not just say it. How would he prove it? By the choices he makes, by how he treats people, by whether he tries to make up for the harm he caused. Emma nodded thoughtfully. That seems fair. 6 months later, I received a letter from Marcus. It was the first communication I'd had from him since the sentencing hearing. The envelope was postmarked from the minimum security facility where he was serving his time, and his name was written in the careful block letters that all prisoners learn to use. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten on lined paper. His handwriting was smaller than I remembered, more careful, as if he'd taken time to think about each word before putting it on paper. "Dear Mom," it began. "I know I have no right to contact you after what I did, but I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about our conversation in the district attorney's office every day for the past year." He wrote about the programs he'd enrolled in while incarcerated. Anger management, financial responsibility, addiction counseling, even though he wasn't addicted to substances but to the feeling of living beyond his means. He wrote about talking to other inmates who'd committed similar crimes, about understanding for the first time how his actions had affected not just me but everyone who'd trusted him. "I used to think I was just bad at making decisions under pressure," he wrote. "But I've learned that what I really was selfish. I thought my problems were more important than other people's rights. I thought my comfort was more important than your security. I thought my image was more important than integrity." He asked about Emma and Olivia, whether they were adjusting well to life back in California, whether they were happy. He didn't ask to see them or demand visitation rights. He just wanted to know they were okay. "I know I can't undo what I did to you," the letter concluded, "but I want you to know that I understand now what you were trying to teach me. Actions have consequences. People matter. Trust, once broken, has to be earned back through behavior, not words. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday I can prove to you that I learned the lesson you were trying to teach me." I read the letter 3 times, then set it aside and didn't respond immediately. I wanted to think about it, to consider whether this was genuine remorse or just another manipulation. A week later, I drove to the prison where Marcus was being held. It was a sprawling complex in the desert, surrounded by razor wire and guard towers, but designed to look more like a college campus than a traditional prison. The visiting room was bright and airy, with vending machines and children's toys scattered around small tables. Marcus looked different when they brought him in. Thinner, older, but somehow more solid than he'd been before his arrest. He'd lost the soft edges that came from too much rich food and not enough physical labor. His eyes were clearer, more direct. We sat across from each other at a small plastic table, neither of us speaking for a long moment. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. "I got your letter. I wasn't sure you'd read it. I read it. I'm not sure what you want me to say in response. I don't want you to say anything. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I put you through, what I took from you. What did you take from me, Marcus? Your sense of safety. Your trust in your own family. Your belief that the person you'd raised and loved would never deliberately hurt you. I nodded. That's exactly right. I can't give those things back to you. But I want you to know that I see them now. I see what I destroyed. What do you see when you think about that morning at Union Station? I see a 73-year-old woman who'd given me everything, standing on a sidewalk in the rain with $200 and nowhere to go. I see the moment I became someone I never thought I could become. And what kind of person was that? The kind who throws away his mother because taking care of her isn't convenient. The kind who steals from people who trust him. The kind who lies to his children about why their grandmother disappeared. We talked for 2 hours. About his time in prison, about the programs he'd completed, about his plans for when he was released. About Emma and Olivia, about Brenda's new life as a working single mother, about the photography classes I was teaching Emma. She's talented, I told him. Really talented. She has an eye for composition that can't be taught. She gets that from you. You always saw things differently than other people. What will you do when you get out? I don't know yet. I'll be a convicted felon. A lot of doors will be closed to me. But I've been thinking about maybe working with a nonprofit, something that helps people who've made financial mistakes, using my experience to warn people about the kinds of choices I made. That sounds appropriate. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What? Do you think there's any chance that Emma and Olivia will want to have a relationship with me when I get out? I thought about my granddaughters, about their questions, and their wisdom and their capacity for love. I think they want to have a father they can be proud of. Whether that's you will depend on who you choose to be from now on. And what about you? Is there any chance you and I can find our way back to being family? I don't know, Marcus. I honestly don't know. But I'm here today, which means I haven't given up completely. When visiting hours ended, Marcus stood to leave but paused at the edge of the table. Mom, I want you to know something. What you did, pursuing those charges, making me face consequences, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. How do you figure that? Because it forced me to look at who I'd become. If you'd just let it go, if you'd forgiven me and moved on, I would have learned that I could steal and lie and hurt people without any real cost. I would have kept being that person. And now? Now I have a chance to become someone different, someone better, someone my daughters can respect. After he was escorted away, I sat in my car in the prison parking lot for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and redemption and second chances. I thought about the man Marcus had been before greed and entitlement consumed him, and the man he might become if he'd truly learned from his mistakes. I thought about Emma and Olivia, growing up with the knowledge that actions have consequences but also that people can change if they're willing to do the hard work of transformation. And I thought about myself, about the woman I'd been when I stood on that sidewalk at Union Station with $17 in my pocket, and the woman I'd become since then. Strong, independent, uncompromising about my own worth. As I drove home through the desert toward the ocean, I realized that Marcus had been right about one thing. Pursuing those charges, refusing to be a victim, demanding justice and accountability, it had been the best thing that ever happened to me too. Because it had taught me that I didn't have to accept being disposable. That even at 73 I could refuse to disappear quietly into the background of other people's lives. That I could demand respect and dignity and love without conditions. And that was a lesson worth whatever pain it had cost to learn. Marcus was released on a Tuesday morning in March, 18 months after his sentencing. I wasn't there to meet him at the prison gates, but Brenda was. She'd asked if I wanted to come, and I'd declined. This was their moment to navigate, their first step toward whatever their relationship would become. I was in my photography class when he regained his freedom, learning about natural lighting techniques from Professor Williams, a retired National Geographic photographer who treated our small group of amateur enthusiasts like serious artists. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my son was walking out of prison, I was discovering talents I never knew I possessed. Emma texted me later that afternoon from Brenda's phone. "Dad's home. He looks different. Skinnier. He asked about you first thing." I typed back, How do you feel about seeing him? Weird. Like I'm meeting someone I used to know a long time ago. That evening, Robert and I had dinner at our favorite restaurant overlooking the marina in Redondo Beach. We'd been dating for over a year now, and there was an easy comfort between us that I'd never experienced with anyone before. With Frank, my late husband, love had been passionate but complicated, full of drama and making up. With Robert, it was steady and peaceful, built on mutual respect and genuine friendship. "You're distracted tonight," he observed over the chocolate soufflé we were sharing. "Marcus got out of prison today." "Ah, how does that make you feel?" "Cautious, hopeful, terrified, all at the same time." "Have you decided whether you'll see him?" "Not yet. I want to see how he handles being out first. Whether he follows through on the things he said he wanted to do." "That seems wise." A week passed before Marcus tried to contact me directly. The call came on a Sunday evening while I was reading on my balcony, watching the waves roll in under a pink and orange sunset. "Mom, it's Marcus." I know I probably should have asked Brenda to call first, but I wanted to talk to you myself. His voice sounded different, quieter, less certain of his welcome. "How are you adjusting to being out?" "It's strange. Everything feels too loud, too fast. Prison has its own rhythm, and it takes time to readjust to the outside world." "Are you staying with Brenda and the girls?" "Number." "I'm renting a studio apartment near downtown Riverside. I didn't think it would be fair to disrupt their routine by moving back in. They've built a good life without me." "That was thoughtful of you." "I'm trying to be more thoughtful about things. Mom, I was wondering if we could meet somewhere. Just to talk. I understand if you're not ready, but I'd like the chance to apologize to you in person." I considered his request while watching a family on the beach below, packing up their umbrellas and chairs as the day ended. A mother and father with 3 young children, all of them laughing as they chased seagulls and collected shells. "There's a coffee shop in Manhattan Beach called Brewster's. Do you know it?" "I can find it. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning. 1 hour, Marcus. That's all I'm promising." "Thank you. That's more than I have any right to ask for." The next morning, I arrived at Brewster's 15 minutes early and chose a table near the window, where I could watch the street. The coffee shop was busy, with the usual Monday morning crowd of professionals, grabbing their caffeine fix before work, but I found a quiet corner where we could talk without being overheard. Marcus arrived exactly on time, looking around the shop until he spotted me. He'd lost at least 30 pounds in prison, and his hair had gone completely gray at the temples. He moved differently too, less aggressively confident, more careful and deliberate. He ordered a simple black coffee and sat down across from me without the casual assumption of welcome I remembered from before his arrest. "You look good, Mom." "Happy. I am happy. Probably happier than I've been in years." "I'm glad. You deserve that." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us unsure how to begin this conversation we'd both been anticipating and dreading. "I got a job," Marcus said finally. "It's not much, just data entry at an accounting firm, but it's legitimate work and they were willing to hire someone with a felony record." "That's good. Are you able to support yourself?" "Barely, but yes. I'm paying child support to Brenda and I'm slowly working on paying back the restitution the court ordered. It'll take years, but I'm committed to it." "And the victim compensation fund I set up?" "That was incredible what you did. Several of my former clients have written to me in prison to say thank you. Not to me, but about you. About your generosity in helping them recover some of what I'd stolen. They didn't deserve to suffer for your mistakes. No, they didn't. And neither did you." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table between us. "What's this?" "A letter I wrote to you in prison but never sent. I've written dozens of them over the past 18 months. This is the one that says what I really need you to hear." I unfolded the paper and read it while Marcus sat quietly, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup like he was trying to draw warmth from it. The letter was different from the one he'd sent me before. Less formal, more raw. He wrote about the specific moments when he'd made choices that hurt me, The day he'd decided to forge my signature on loan documents. The morning he'd driven me to Union Station planning to abandon me there. The weeks afterward when he'd told himself I was probably fine, that I'd figure something out. I used to tell myself that you were tougher than other people, he'd written. That you could handle anything, so it was okay to give you harder things to handle. But I realize now that I was just making excuses for treating you worse than I would treat a stranger. I convinced myself you were strong so I could be weak. The letter went on to detail the programs he'd completed in prison, the other inmates he'd met who'd committed similar crimes against their families, the counselor who'd helped him understand the difference between explaining his behavior and excusing it. I can explain why I stole from you, the letter concluded. I was financially desperate and too proud to ask for help, but I can't excuse it. There's no excuse for betraying the trust of someone who loved me unconditionally. There's no excuse for abandoning my mother because taking care of her wasn't convenient. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the table. Do you believe what you've written here? Every word. Then why didn't you send it? Because I realized that sending you letters full of apologies was just another way of asking you to take care of my emotional needs. I needed to prove I'd changed through my actions, not my words. And how do you plan to do that? I don't know yet. That's what I was hoping to talk to you about. I sipped my coffee and studied my son's face. He looked older, yes, but also somehow more present than he'd been in years. More focused. Less scattered by the constant anxiety of maintaining an image he couldn't afford. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Are you here because you've genuinely changed, or because you want something from me? Both, he said without hesitation. I believe I've changed, but I also want something from you. What do you want? I want a chance to earn your forgiveness. Not to be given it automatically, but to earn it over time through consistent behavior. And what would that look like? I don't know. That's why I wanted to talk to you. I don't think I have the right to decide what earning your forgiveness would require. I think that's something you'd have to tell me. I looked out the window at the morning joggers and dog walkers, people starting their day with purpose and energy. Normal people living normal lives, people who probably never had to worry about their children stealing from them or abandoning them at train stations. Marcus, I've built a good life for myself since you left me at Union Station. I have friends, activities, a relationship with a wonderful man. I have a relationship with your daughters that doesn't depend on you or your approval. I don't need you in my life anymore. I understand that. Do you? Because for most of your adult life, you've operated on the assumption that I needed you more than you needed me. That I'd always be there, always forgive you, always put your needs ahead of my own dignity. You're right, I did assume that. I don't want to be needed anymore, Marcus. I don't want to be the person people turn to when they need something, but ignore when they don't. What do you want to be? I want to be chosen. I want the people in my life to be there because they value my company, not because they feel obligated, or because I'm useful to them. Marcus nodded slowly. So if I want to rebuild a relationship with you, I have to prove that I choose to be in your life, not that I need you to be in mine. That's exactly right. How do I do that? You figure that out. That's not my job anymore. He smiled for the first time since sitting down, a real smile that reached his eyes. You've gotten a lot tougher, haven't you? I've gotten more honest about what I will and won't accept. I like it. It suits you. We talked for another 30 minutes about practical things. His job, his apartment, his relationship with Emma and Olivia. He was seeing them twice a week. Supervised visits at first, that had gradually expanded to overnight stays every other weekend. They're amazing kids, he said. Emma's become this incredible photographer, and Olivia's learning to play violin. They're both doing well in school, making friends. Brenda's done a beautiful job raising them. They're resilient. They are, but they ask about you constantly, when they can see you again. Whether you still love them, whether you're proud of them. And what do you tell them? I tell them that you love them very much, but that you need time to figure out how our family fits together now that everything's changed. That's a good answer. When our hour was up, Marcus stood to leave but paused beside the table. Mom, can I ask you one more thing? What? Are you proud of who you've become? Since all this happened, I mean. I thought about the question seriously. Yes, I am. I'm proud that I stood up for myself. I'm proud that I didn't let you get away with stealing from me, just to keep the peace. I'm proud that I built a new life instead of just surviving the destruction of my old one. Good. You should be proud. What you did, fighting back the way you did, it saved me from becoming someone even worse than I already was. 3 months later, on Emma's 10th birthday, I hosted a party at my apartment. It was a small gathering, just Emma, Olivia, Brenda, Robert, and me. Marcus wasn't invited, not because I was trying to punish him, but because I wanted this to be about Emma, not about navigating family drama. Emma had requested a photography-themed party, so we set up different stations around the apartment where she and Olivia could practice different techniques. We had a portrait station with professional lighting, a macro station for close-up shots of flowers and jewelry, and a landscape station on the balcony overlooking the ocean. This is the best birthday ever, Emma declared as she showed me a stunning black and white portrait she'd taken of her sister. Can we do this every year? We can do whatever you want for your birthday, sweetheart. Later, while the girls were showing Robert their favorite photos from the day, Brenda and I stood on the balcony watching the sunset. Thank you for this, she said. Emma's been looking forward to it for weeks. She's turning into quite the artist. She wants to enter one of her photos in a contest at school. A picture she took of an old man feeding pigeons at the pier. It's beautiful. She has a good eye for finding meaning in ordinary moments. She gets that from you. This whole photography thing started because you took the time to teach her. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the waves roll in. Brenda, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you okay? Really okay? Not just financially, but emotionally. I think so. It's been hard, adjusting to being a single mother, working full-time, dealing with all the shame and gossip about Marcus. But I'm stronger than I thought I was. You are strong. You always were. You just forgot for a while. I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't fought back. If you'd just disappeared quietly like Marcus expected you to. What do you think would have happened? I think he would have kept escalating. Stealing more money, taking bigger risks, treating people worse. I think eventually he would have done something that hurt the girls directly. Maybe. Definitely. And I would have let him, because I didn't know how to stand up to him either. Watching you refuse to be a victim taught me that I didn't have to be one either. 6 months after Marcus's release, he called to ask if he could take me to lunch for my 75th birthday. Not a family celebration, just the two of us. Why? I asked. Because I want to show you something. What kind of something? Something I've been working on. A way of proving that I've changed. We met at a small restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. The kind of place where the food was good but not fancy. Where you could have a conversation without being interrupted by pretentious service or loud music. Marcus looked different again. He'd gained back some of the weight he'd lost in prison, but it was healthy weight, muscle rather than the soft bulk of his pre-arrest lifestyle. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis, clothes that were clean and neat but not expensive. You look well, I told him. I feel well, clearer than I have in years. What did you want to show me? He pulled out a tablet and opened a presentation that looked professionally designed. I've been working with a nonprofit called Fresh Start Financial. They help people who've made serious financial mistakes rebuild their lives and learn better money management. And what's your role? I speak to groups about what financial desperation can lead to if you don't ask for help. I tell my story, including what I did to you, as a warning about how easy it is to rationalize stealing from people you love. He showed me photos from his presentations. Rooms full of people who looked like they were struggling, who'd come to hear from someone who'd hit rock bottom and found a way back up. How long have you been doing this? 4 months. 3 presentations a week, sometimes more. I also do one-on-one counseling with people who are tempted to commit fraud, or who've already started down that path. Do you get paid for this? Barely enough to cover expenses. But that's not why I do it. Why do you do it? Because I want to prevent other families from going through what ours did. Because I want to use the worst thing I ever did to help other people make better choices. He showed me testimonials from people who'd attended his presentations, letters from family members whose loved ones had decided not to commit fraud after hearing Marcus speak. "This one's my favorite," he said, showing me a handwritten note from an elderly woman. "My son was planning to forge my name on some loan documents, but after hearing your presentation, he came to me instead and asked for help. We worked out a payment plan that didn't require him to steal from me. Thank you for saving our relationship." I read the letter twice, thinking about the woman who'd written it, about the son who'd made a different choice than Marcus had made. How does it feel talking about what you did to strangers? Horrible and necessary. Every time I tell the story, I have to relive the shame of what I did to you. But every time I see someone in the audience nodding, recognizing themselves in my story, I know it's worth it. Do you talk about me specifically? I talk about a 73-year-old woman who trusted her son with her house and her future, and how he betrayed that trust. I don't use your name, but I talk about you. What do you say about me? I tell them that you could have disappeared quietly like I expected you to, that you could have been too ashamed or too afraid to fight back. But instead, you hired an attorney and demanded justice, even though it meant your son going to prison. How do people react to that? They applaud. Every single time, they applaud. Because they understand that what you did wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be invisible. After lunch, we walked through downtown Los Angeles, past the courthouse where Marcus had been sentenced, past the office building where I'd first met with Rebecca Chen. The city looked different to me now, less intimidating, more like a place where I belonged. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "What?" "When you were sitting in that courtroom watching me get sentenced, did you feel sorry for me?" "Yes. But you didn't try to stop it." "No." "Why not?" "Because feeling sorry for someone and enabling their bad behavior are two different things. I felt sorry for the man you'd become, but I wasn't willing to let that man avoid consequences for his actions. I'm glad you didn't." "Are you really?" "Really." Prison was the first time in my adult life that I couldn't charm or manipulate or buy my way out of a situation. I had to sit with what I'd done and figure out how to live with myself. And what did you figure out? That I'd spent years running from anything that made me uncomfortable. I'd rather steal money than admit I was struggling financially. I'd rather abandon my mother than deal with the complexity of caring for her. I'd rather lie to my children than face their disappointment. And now? Now I'm trying to do the opposite. When something makes me uncomfortable, I sit with it until I understand why. When I'm struggling, I ask for help instead of trying to solve problems by hurting other people. We stopped at a small park and sat on a bench facing a fountain where children were throwing pennies and making wishes. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." "Okay. I forgive you." He turned to look at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "You do?" "I do. Not because you've suffered enough, or because I miss the way things used to be. I forgive you because you've shown me that you understand what you did wrong, and you're working to make sure you never do it again." Tears started forming in his eyes. "Thank you. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. We can't go back, Marcus. Too much has changed." "I know. I don't want to go back. The way things were, it wasn't healthy for any of us. So what do you want?" "I want to build something new with you, something based on mutual respect instead of obligation. Something where I choose to be in your life because I value you, not because I need something from you." That sounds like something I might be interested in. 2 years later, I stood in the art gallery in Laguna Beach, where Emma was having her first photography exhibition. At 12 years old, she was the youngest artist ever featured at the prestigious Ocean View Gallery, and her black and white portraits of homeless individuals were drawing attention from collectors and critics alike. The opening reception was packed with people admiring Emma's work, But I found myself watching my granddaughter more than her photographs. She moved through the crowd with confidence and grace, explaining her artistic process to adults who treated her opinions with respect. "She's remarkable," Robert said, joining me, near a portrait of an elderly woman sitting on a park bench with a small dog in her lap. "This one reminds me of you." "How so?" "The strength in her eyes, the dignity, the sense that she's survived things that would break other people." Marcus approached us, carrying glasses of wine and sparkling cider for Emma. "Mom, Robert, thank you for coming tonight." "We wouldn't miss it," I said, accepting a glass. "How's our star artist holding up?" "She's in her element. 3 people have already asked about purchasing prints." "That's wonderful." We stood together watching Emma explain her work to a reporter from the local arts magazine. She was articulate and thoughtful, discussing the importance of seeing homeless individuals as human beings with stories worth telling. "Where did she get this social conscience?" I asked. "From you," Marcus said without hesitation. "From watching you stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. From learning that people with power have a responsibility to help people without it." "I never taught her that directly." "You didn't have to. You showed her by example, when you set up that fund to help my clients. When you refused to be a victim, even when it would have been easier. When you chose justice over comfort." Brenda joined our group, beaming with pride at her daughter's success. "The gallery owner wants to offer Emma a solo show next year. Can you believe it?" "I can believe it," I said. "She's got something special." "She gets it from her grandmother," Brenda said, smiling at me. "The eye for seeing beauty and meaning in unexpected places." Later that evening, after the reception ended and the gallery closed, our little family went to dinner at Emma's favorite restaurant. Emma and Olivia sat between Marcus and Brenda, chattering excitedly about the evening's success, while Robert and I watched from across the table. "Grandmother Judy," Olivia said, "Emma's teacher wants us to write essays about our heroes." "Can I write about you?" "What would you say about me?" "I'd say that you're the kind of person who doesn't let people be mean to her, even when those people are family. And that you taught us that standing up for yourself isn't mean, it's necessary." "That sounds like a good essay topic." "Emma's going to write about Dorothea Lange, that photographer you told us about. But I want to write about someone I actually know." After dinner, as we stood outside the restaurant saying our goodbyes, Marcus pulled me aside. "Mom, I have something to tell you." "What's that?" "I've been offered a full-time position with Fresh Start Financial, director of their speakers bureau. It would mean coordinating presentations across the whole state, training other people to share their stories." "That's wonderful. Are you going to take it?" "I want to. But it would mean traveling more, being away from the girls more often." "I wanted to ask what you thought." "What I think doesn't matter, Marcus. What matters is what you think is right." "I think it's right. I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing with the rest of my life. Using my mistakes to help other people avoid making the same ones." "Then you should do it." The girls would stay with Brenda, obviously, but I was hoping you might be willing to spend more time with them when I'm traveling. Not as a babysitter or because they need you, but because they want to spend time with their grandmother. I looked over at Emma and Olivia, these remarkable young women who'd inherited the best parts of their father and none of his weaknesses, who'd learned from his mistakes without being defined by them. I'd love to spend more time with them. Thank you for everything. For not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. For showing me that love doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. You don't have to thank me for demanding that you be held accountable for your actions, Marcus. That's not a favor I did for you, that's basic human dignity. I know, but I'm grateful anyway. 6 months later, I was sitting on my balcony reading when Emma called with exciting news. She'd been accepted into a summer photography program at UCLA, the youngest participant they'd ever admitted. "Grandmother Judy, will you come with me to the orientation next week?" "Mom has to work, and I want you there." "Of course, sweetheart. I'd be honored." "There's something else. The program director wants to interview me about how I got started in photography. She wants to know about my influences and inspirations." "That's wonderful. I'm going to tell her about you. About how you taught me that art isn't just about making pretty pictures. It's about showing people truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Is that what I taught you? That's what you taught all of us. That truth matters more than comfort. That doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. After we hung up, I sat watching the sun set over the Pacific, thinking about the woman I'd been 3 years ago when Marcus abandoned me at Union Station. That woman had believed she was powerless, disposable, grateful for whatever scraps of love people threw her way. This woman, the one I'd become, knew better. She knew that love without respect isn't really love at all. She knew that family isn't just about blood, but about choosing to show up for each other consistently and with integrity. She knew that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behavior. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Dinner tomorrow?" "I have something I want to ask you." I smiled and typed back, "Yes. Looking forward to it." The next evening, Robert picked me up and drove us to the restaurant where we'd had our first date, a small place overlooking the marina in Redondo Beach. We'd been together for over 2 years now, and I'd never been happier or more content in a relationship. Over dessert, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Judith, I have something to ask you, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. That sounds serious." "It is serious. Will you marry me?" I looked at this wonderful man who'd shown me what it meant to be valued and respected, who'd supported me through the hardest period of my life without trying to fix or manage me. "Robert, are you asking me because you need a wife, or because you choose to spend your life with me?" He laughed, a sound full of warmth and understanding. "I'm asking because I choose you. Every day for the rest of my life I choose you." "Then yes." The answer is yes. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony on the beach below my apartment. Emma was my maid of honor, and Olivia was the flower girl. Marcus walked me down the makeshift aisle we'd created in the sand, and when the officiant asked who was giving me away, he said, "No one gives Judith Adams away. She chooses for herself." It was the perfect answer, and the perfect day, and the perfect beginning to this new chapter of my life. That night, as Robert and I danced on the beach under a sky full of stars, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain and betrayal that had forced me to discover my own strength. The choice to demand justice instead of accepting injustice. The decision to build a new life instead of just surviving the destruction of my old one. I thought about Helen, whose inheritance had given me the resources to fight back, and about Emma and Olivia, who would grow up knowing that women don't have to accept being treated poorly by anyone, including family. Most of all, I thought about the woman I'd become. Strong without being bitter. Forgiving without being naive. Loving without being desperate. At 76 years old, I was finally exactly who I was meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.